Okay, so now we're going to go back to our directly reviewing not Paul, but Jesus. And don't worry, I'm keeping track of all the arguments and we'll recap them with you in a final episode. We've got 5 main arguments so far that are broader than just Damascus. The last one is where we're starting to get into the Damascus Road issues. I'm keeping track of the rebuttal case, so we'll go over those when we got a complete synthesis of what that is, if you hang in there. And then I'm going to keep track of what the Damascus Road arguments are. And then I want to throw this thought at you. It just came to me before I got on here. Is basically the biggest gap of all. Think about all the communities that are following Paul. They're in Galatia. They're at Philippi. So we're talking about like around Greece and all this other kind of stuff. And that's way, way past. Just want to let you know. You know where Damascus, Syria is? That's pretty close to Jerusalem. It's close to Caesarea. But you want to go way further out. You have to go to Ephesus and you got to go to Philippi. And that's a long distance away. So where did he have his experience? Did he have it in Ephesus with Jesus? Did he have his experience in Philippi with Jesus? How about Corinth? Did he have his experience there? He's spending all these times in these other places. Then the one city he should be in all the time is Damascus. Don't you think? If Ananias was a real person and it's really happened 30 years ago, do you think there would be no community of believers? That he has no letters to the Christians of Syria, of Damascus? Come on, there's something wrong there. I had never even thought about it until just 5 minutes ago, thanks to the probing questions of Mr. Jeremy Bentham. So let's keep going. He's going to stimulate more thinking outside the box, and that's what you need to solve this problem and help Christians find Christ. That's what we're all about here. Okay, so I'm going to switch back, and we'll go back into the Bentham. Okay, so we're going to head back here. So, okay, so we last covered it up to the point in time that Paul had uh, no no fewer than eight provinces, and in no event did he ever send anybody, Corinthians or Galatians or any of them. He at no time provided any uh, claim to them of the supernatural occurrence with Jesus. He never says anything about it. I mean, he alludes to it maybe when he says, I saw Christ, but he doesn't say how he saw Christ. And if you were a Galatian and you don't know anything about you don't know anything, you're going to assume he's actually saw him, like a regular person. I saw the resurrected Christ. You don't have any idea about anything about lights and visions and people falling down and people hearing the voice and some hearing it and not understanding the voice. You don't know any of that if you're a Galatian or Corinthian or a Philippian or a Thessalonian. None of it. None of them are told what supposedly happened that gives him all his validity. Okay. So he's going to say here, this is important. I got to go to the prior page. He's going to say here, is it in the nature of the case that in no instance in any of his numerous epistles he should have felt the necessity of stating, and accordingly have stated, to any of these his disciples the circumstances attending the events of his conversion, an event on which alone all his professions were founded? Okay, we already heard that before. Circumstances, too, which, as stated in his historian's narrative, Luke, could not from their nature have been known to any human being other than himself. So Paul doesn't talk about it. Who else knows about it? Three, we don't know, unnamed individuals are supposedly with him. And by the way, the mark of a story not being incredible is you don't name those people. And these are people he was working with. Remember, he was working inside the high priest, the high priest circle, and these are people, men, presumably who are there to aid him to arrest people and beat up people and whatever else they're going to do. Hey, you got to name them. They're your only witnesses. Let's see what they say. Did this really happen? But you don't name them. You don't even name them as hostile witnesses. And by the way, the strongest testimony for a fact is a hostile witness admits it. So what if these three people or 4 people, however many there were touched by the miracle of the sun being brighter than the sun. Wouldn't you think one of them would think, hey, there was something miraculous here. And I heard a voice. It was coming from the sky, like God speaking from heaven. So, see, ladies and gentlemen, it's not plausible that these men, whoever they were, would never be identified. They would be like anybody else, but like, you know what? This is the most amazing experience I've had in my life. A light brighter than the sun, and voice speaking from heaven. And this person appeared, and then, physically in front of us. They're witnesses to Christ too. And by the way, I just thought about this. Paul is totally inconsistent. He says Christ appeared to him out of season, and he makes it look like he's the only person who sees him. But he's claiming there were men with him, several men, presumably at least two. Those people should have been counted, and their names should have been put in the list of those who also saw Christ resurrected, but he doesn't do it because they weren't there. And this isn't a true account of what happened. I just figured it out. Bentham is right on the cusp of getting right at the point. And see, he's probing this so hard. We're going to start seeing things we never saw before. I never saw that till just this second. Let's keep going. Yet in no one of his epistles to any of his disciples of any such particular, either in the way of direct assertion or in the way of allusion, is any trace to be found. And my comment, why not strong community from Damascus? I already told you that. Why is there no, there should be the largest congregation of Christianity should be right there in Damascus, Syria, because this is where Paul claims that some huge event happened on the road that Ananias could confirm, a man who was a holy and righteous man. And there's no opposition. There's no high priesthood in that town. And Paul, is there, and he can tell everybody. And the men who were with him would be the witnesses to this miraculous vision. This should have had huge impact. This should have had, just like Jerusalem was this emanating spot for Christianity to grow, there should have been this huge movement coming out of Damascus, Syria. But there's nothing. There's not even a church there, according to we don't see of any letters going there. We don't hear of any church there. Maybe there is a church. There is a church in Antioch, Syria, but not in Damascus, Syria. Yeah, something's not right in Denmark. Let's put it that way. Of Revelation, yes. Of Revelation, this one most momentous indeed, but at the same time most mysterious and uninstructive word. Repetitions we have in abundance. But of the time and manner of the alleged communication, or of the matter communicated, nothing is anywhere said. I'm not sure exactly what he means. I guess what he's saying is the time. He did say it was at noonday. The manner of communication, I don't know. I think that's a verbal communication. You could hear it. Or the matter communicated. I think we're actually hearing that, but it's only from one voice. Okay. So I don't know what that sentence means. In these considerations may be seen apart of those on which in due season will be seen grounded the inference that at no time in all the personal conferences he had with the apostles was any such story told by Paul, as is related by the author of Acts. Now, so that is technically correct. We do not see in Acts 15 Paul saying anything to the 12 about it. Then in Acts 9, if you back up, you'll see that after Paul went to the temple, was told by his Jesus, don't go see the apostles. They won't believe you met me, which is, what have I said? That's the most damning statement of all in the entire New Testament, that Paul is not invalid, that he didn't even know. I mean, any moronic person would know that Jesus Christ, the Lord, this person miraculously appearing to you on roads, he's telling you, I can't convince the 12 that are 25 yards outside the door of this temple each day on the portico on Solomon's porch. I can't convince them that you've met me. All I got to do is walk outside. All I got to do is appear to them in the vision. If it's a vision if they want, or if they want to have the same appearance I gave you, I'll be as bright as the sun. I'll stand right over them and I'll scream and yell, this is my man, Paul. Paul, what are you thinking? They're 25 yards from where you were sitting in the in the temple. It's the stupidest thing. I can't believe but he tells a story, which means he thinks anyone would believe he would be that dumb. And I have to believe he is that dumb, because he tells a story that makes himself look like the stupidest person that's ever lived. Truly, Jesus Christ has come to you miraculously on a road, and that guy tells you, I'm not going to be able to convince the 12 you really met me. So flee for your life. Is this, in essence, his Jesus saying, you're in danger. Get out of here. Just go directly to the Gentiles. To me, that ends the whole argument. But anyway, but the point here he's pointing out is there is no time where Paul actually says this story in front of the 12. Wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you do that? Wouldn't you do that sometime? Now, what happens is in Acts 9 is Barnabas tells the overview, but without the details, that Paul met Jesus in the wilderness, blah, 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 blah. We need to go back and take a look at that. We're going to look at that ourselves. But he tells the story, which is a broad outline. And you know what? I'm going to take a look at that real quick, and we'll be back. Okay, so I want to show you three things very quickly. So Bentham is saying, in these considerations may be seen apart, though but apart, of those in which in due season will be seen grounded the inference that at no time in all the personal conferences he had with the apostles was any such story told by Paul as is related by the author of Acts. Okay, so now let's go take a look at, he's saying that the story was never told directly to the 12 apostles, and I'm going to show you that's true, but we're going to see there's a little detail on that. Okay, so now we need to go look at what the Jesus of Paul says to him in this account Paul gives in Acts 22, verse 17 to 21, when he's in a trance, an ecstasy at the temple praying. The apostles are only 25 yards away on the portico of Solomon's porch. And this is what happens. After I came back to Jerusalem, so he'd been in Damascus, the first thing he thinks of after some delay is he goes to see the 12 apostles. Makes perfect sense. Wouldn't you want to do that? Get validated by them? But he's told by his Jesus not to do that. But then you're going to see he actually bypasses what Jesus says and does something around Jesus' command, not to go see them. All right. But sneaky guy, even with his own Jesus. After I came back to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple complex, I went into a visionary state, ecstasia, and that's how demons talk to humans. That's typically correct, and that's a biblical thing, not a thing I'm pulling out of the air. That's actually correct. And saw him telling me, hurry and get out of Jerusalem, him meaning capital him, Jesus, get out of Jerusalem quickly because they will not accept your testimony about me. So they will not believe what he's saying, that Jesus met with Paul. And then Paul responds, but I said, Lord, they know that in synagogue after synagogue, I had those who believed in you imprisoned and beaten. And when the blood of your witness Stephen was being shed, I was standing by and approving, and I guarded the clothes of those who killed him. Then he said to me, go, because I will send you far away to the Gentiles, period. And that's the end of the experience. So Paul is told by his Jesus, they will not accept your testimony about me. They will not believe you that you've met me. Okay. And so to protect him from the harm that instead of Jesus going to talk, Jesus, just go 25 yards out the door. You appeared to Paul in Damascus on the road. So you don't seem to have any concern about the sign of the Son of Man prophecy anymore. You're just going to violate it willy-nilly and show up in private places and even public places. Just go walk outside the door. If you're really the true Jesus, or why not you appear in a vision, just like you did for Paul? But you're telling him he's not going to have anybody believe him. And the fact that Paul fell for this story is just beyond belief. But he's going to get around him. He's going to circumvent Jesus. Watch what happens next. Now the stories are told so Paul's telling this story, just so you know, many years after when it first happened. So when it first happened, this is what he's saying happened. So this happened, let's say we're almost 16, 17 years later, right? 17 years after the fact. So imagine you go back 17 years, you're going to be, where would you be? Exactly at Acts 9. So what he next does when he gets out of the temple, this is what he next does. When he came to Jerusalem, Paul, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him, not believing that he really was a disciple. So Jesus said, don't do that. And he clearly had not seen them yet. He said, don't go there because they won't believe you met me. These disciples have got the right message from Jesus. To that extent, this Jesus was correct. He couldn't convince anybody that Paul had met him. But Barnabas, So what's Paul doing? Barnabas is going to help Paul get accepted, but notice Paul never speaks. Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles. He told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So let me just say this. The apostles have no idea that seeing him meant other than a vision. You know, you can see the Lord in a vision. He can meet you in a private place and all that, and you haven't violated the sign of the Son of Man. They don't know that Paul is claiming that other people with him could see the light, the bright light, and they could hear the voice, but maybe not understand it. They don't. These apostles had no clue, and we have another video that shows it when Peter confronts Paul about this in the Clementine homilies. Yes, I know it's not a biblical book, but it is actually very to me, it sounds more legitimate than a lot of other stuff you might be reading from Paul. It's just straight book of Acts for the true 12 apostles, and nothing bizarre in it. Just the everyday type issues are happening, and it seems to me completely legitimate. And Paul is talking to Peter about this whole thing, and Peter's saying, visions do not prepare you to do ministry. You have to spend some time with us and learn from us. And that makes perfect sense. So in Peter's saying that, and that's being recorded in the Clementine homilies, they have no idea that he's claiming it was an actual physical appearance of Jesus, which is exactly what Paul says it was. So, and this is how it ends. And so he told them how Saul on his journey had seen the Lord, and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. I want to focus on that last thing. So he claims he preached for a time fearlessly in Damascus, but there's not a single soul that we know in Damascus that became a Christian community arising out of this, or have any knowledge of what Paul's talking about. None. Do you remember any mention of Damascus as having a Christian community? I don't remember that. Maybe I'm missing it. So please, if there's a Damascus community of Christians that are supporters of Paul, I'd love to hear that. But all the supporters of Paul are in Ephesus, Corinth, Thessalonica, Philippi, and those places. But Damascus, Syria, which is a stone's throw from Antioch, we don't hear any supporters in Damascus, and that's a much bigger city than Antioch, and it is some distance away. But we hear none of a Christian community about one of the most famous events in Christian history. All these people should be well known. Ananias, all the men on the road with him should have been converted, or most of them, because it was a miracle. What Paul saw was a out and out miracle. The sun was brighter. Excuse me. The light of Jesus was brighter than the sun. How many times are you going to see that in your life and say, I'm not going to believe that was a real thing? If that really happened to you, you'd think, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So all the people with him should have been converts to Christianity, to Paulianity, whatever. There's no record of any of them. They should be the leading voices of Christian history of that time. Everybody should be interviewing and then knocking down their doors to say, we want to meet you. We want to learn everything you heard happened on that event. It's a zero, everybody. It's a nothing. There's a nothing burger there. Yet he preached fearlessly. That's what Barnabas is saying in Damascus. Okay, so now we go back to Jeremy Bentham. I'm sorry I interject, but I think when he stimulates the mental processes, which is why I read these things, I don't read them because I think they're the last word. It helps us think. That's why reading these books are useful. It's not just so that you can use a quote of somebody, but it gets your brain matter moving. You go, oh my gosh, I can see things I didn't see before by reading them. So one other idea I threw in here is maybe Paul is under orders not to repeat what he was told to any of the 12, because either Satan, if the source, knew the apostles would realize the Son of Man prophecy in Matthew 24 applies. So I believe that. I think that's probably the right answer. He never tells anybody when he sees him, he means really physically saw Jesus reappear down here on earth after the ascension. And the apostles would go, well, that can't happen. You could see him in a vision, but not in not a reappearance on earth. He said he would never do that until the return, when he returns. It's a second coming. God, and then the other option is God restrained Satan, so the test was not so difficult for us to pass. I mean, I can't honestly. This is so obvious just from the book of Acts that nobody should have ever been fooled by Paul. but just what I told you about the apostles are 25 yards away from a Jesus who says, "They won't believe your testimony about me, so just leave." I know you feel bad. You want to apologize to the 12 apostles. You want to apologize to the community, the leadership. I get it. But you know what? They won't believe you. That just simply does not wash. That will never go away because it's written right in stone in the Acts of the Apostles. Okay, let's keep going on. I'm going to give you a little bit more. On the supposition that the narrative, such as it is genuine, taking it as a whole, a very important source of division from which it will require to be divided in idea into two parts or periods. So he's going to start breaking it down. This is excellent. This is the kind of thinking you need. We need, all of us. Period the first, containing the portion of the time anterior to the historian's admission into the train of the supposed apostle. So that's interesting. What's he thinking? Period the second, containing the portion of the time posterior to that event. So before Luke gets involved and after Luke gets involved. So that's an interesting, well, how does that help us? This latter portion continuing as far as appears to the time at which the history closes. So why is this division important? I don't know. In this latest and last mentioned period are comprised all the several facts or supposed facts in relation to which any grounds appear for the supposition that the historian was, in his own person, a percipient witness. Okay. So I guess he's trying to say is he's not a witness to the events other than what he knows once he gets involved directly with Paul. In relation to all the several facts or supposed facts anterior to this period, the best evidence, which for anything that appears ever came within his reach, was composed of such statements as, in the course of his service, it may have been the pleasure of the master, meaning Paul, to make to, or in the hearing of this, his attendant. All right, so what he's saying is, what it appears from all evidence is that Luke is completely relying upon Paul, and that's obvious. There's nobody else that he identifies as a witness to these events. All right. So he's been exposed to statements, or he hasn't been, or that were in the hearing of the attendant. So let's say there was somebody else present, might have been present, but they were just sitting there. Whatsoever may be the grounds of suspicion that may be found attaching themselves to evidence passing through such a channel or issuing from such a source, other evidence will, if taken in the lump, present itself as being in comparison much less trustworthy. Okay. So I'd say this is already pretty untrustworthy, but we'll see. All other evidence consists of statements coming from we know not whom. Okay, and that's right. Do we know who are these people really? Ultimately, who were the people who saw the? Paul said the men with him saw the light. Can we see their names? No. At one point, he said they heard the sound. Can we have them also testify? No, we don't know their names. And then you said, Paul, that they didn't hear the voice. Do you mean it was they didn't understand the voice, or they heard the voice but they didn't understand it? As some people argue, can we talk to these people, Paul, and find out which way it is? No, you can't. I'm not going to tell you. I don't remember their names. I know I worked with them. I know we went and beat up and killed people, but I don't know who they are. Okay, we do not know whom. At we know not what times. So we don't really know when this really happened. I mean, Paul's not specific. And we know not what occasion, each of them with we know not how many reporting witnesses, one after and from another, through so many different and successive channels between the percipient witnesses or witnesses and the last reporting witness or witnesses from whom the historian received the statement in the way of personal intercourse. Yeah, so we do not know the chain of evidence here, and Bentham is an expert in creating evidence rules for courts, and so this is the same type of thing when you have to validate an account like this, which the entire world of history turns on people. Half of Christianity or more believes Paul more than they do Jesus, and give him more validity. I mean, actually, if you really understand Mormonism and you understand Roman Catholicism, Mormonism does the same thing. They take all Pauline doctrine. They actually cite and quote Paul inside of Mormonism as more authoritative in getting than Jesus. I mean, in my view of reading with the summary I gave you, there's a video I did on that. It's like they give more authority to Paul than they do Jesus to abrogate things and change things and so on. And Roman Catholicism, they used Paul to get rid of Sabbath, and they used Paul to get rid of the law. And so it's just, be a good person kind of thing. And that's not bad. It's better than just the faith alone view, which is just be a believing person, but you don't have to be a good person. It's just optional. I mean, so the Reformation actually took us one notch down, at least for a large segment of Protestant Christianity. Okay. Anyway, the period of rumor and the period of observation. By these two appellations, it should seem, I'm reading now, by these two appellations, it should seem, may the two periods be not altogether unaptly or uninstructively distinguished. So he's saying there's a period of rumor, and then there's a period of observation. So he's going to start breaking it down. So we're going to leave this for another time to go into depth, but you can see he is carefully and methodically breaking it down, and that's helping us to make even finer, more on point analyses ourselves of how to examine this event. So that's when you're reading something very very important, because he's helping you think it through, because these are details you tend not to focus in on and not to balance against other things unless you have somebody like him who's very expert in evidence and logical connections to help synthesize and break down something so you can understand it completely and fully, totally. Okay, God bless everybody. I hope this helped. Ciao. Bye.